Hi, I'm gonna talk about the change of Middle English to the modern age. English was not just a matter of changing vocabulary of pronunciation. It was the beginning of a new era in the history of English, in an era of linguistic change, in a language with great variations. In a dialect was replaced by a new era of more standardized language, with a rich vocabulary and established literature. One of the most influential books in the standardization of English language was the Bible, which was first published in 1527 as a translation by William Tyndale, and again in 1939 as the Great Bible, which was edited by Miles Coverdale based on the Tyndale's translation. This Bible was read to the congregation regularly in churches, and thus became familiar to the much of the population of England as a standard part of the language. In 1709, Shakespeare's sonnets published. In 1707, the first successful English colony in the New World, Jamestown, Virginia, a specific early American English vocabulary borrowed from indigenous languages. In 1712, the King of James Bible is published, again based on the Tyndale's translation. Remains the Bible in the Church of England for many years. Development of modern English port cities of the 17th century gained influence over the former country capitals. England experienced a new period of the internal peace and stability with the promotion of art and literature in the year 1690. Modern English can be taken to have fully emerged at the beginning of the Georgian era in the 1714, but word spelling remained fluid until the publication of Johnson's A Dictionary of the English Language in the 1755. The importance of William Shakespeare's towers over the other Elizabeth authors was the result of his acceptance during the 17th and the 18th century, which contributed directly to the development of Standard English. As a result, the words of Shakespeare are familiar and understandable today, 400 years after they were written. But the words of Geoffrey Chaucer and William Gladstone, written just 200 years ago, are considerably more difficult for average readers.
Modern English had a big change in that time. The most important change that I have inherited in its structure was the contraction and the user B and U. That I'm gonna explain by image and with some draw that I'm gonna make. U and B were not yet considered two distinct letters, but different forms of the same letter. B was used at the start of a word and U elsewhere. Like the examples, you can notice that people used to write point and understand with B at the start of the word. Right now, we used to write with U, point and understand. This change was because in Latin, U represents a graphical variant of B. Another change was U by B. For example, have. People used to write with U. Right now, we write with a B in the middle. The same pass at the end of words music and physics. People in Middle English used to write and pronounce music with a K at the end. We delete the K and now we write just music without K. The most important change was the contraction. Why? Because people in that time used to contraction I, like you can see in the example. It was, but they omit I and just write apostrophe T and was. Right now, we don't use that. We use it was as completely words. What happened with it is a recently change that people had how I can say create by the time. Why? Because you notice in the second example that it was by the contrary. Right now we only omit the I when it is near to another consonant. It's all about the structure of modern English. Bye!
History of English literature. It's difficult to discuss such a broad range of words in just a short lesson, so let's take a look at the first three major periods of English literature. But at this moment, I specific one epoch and the Middle English literature in 2150 and 100 century. Some scholars will argue that the Middle English period started as early as the 100 century. However, because the English language did not evolve into a dialect we could understand today until about the 12th century, 1150 seems like a better place to start. By far the most popular and influential writer during this period was Gregory Chaucer. He was considered the first great English poet. His work encompasses a variety of tones, styles, and genres. One of his most renowned works, The Canterbury Tales, is an epic story on pilgrim playful between against each other in a storytelling contest. Each pilgrim tale is set in a narrative of its now the point structure in the frame narrative, or a story within a story, a literary device that will go on to becoming one of the most popular storytelling techniques in the history literature. In the middle part of the 12th century, there was a revival of literary poetry. Perhaps the most popular example was Purity of Patience, a grouping of poems written by unknown poet. A foreign work found the same manuscript and presumed to be of the same author, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, is on the finished Arthurian romance from this time period. Towards the end of the 41st century, and the philosopher named John Wycliffe translated the first complement vernacular, common people's dialect English version of the Bible. The English literature have a different forms in the period. The first period I talked with that the Anglo-Saxon or the English period, the Anglo-Norman period, the age of Chaucer, the revival of learning, the age of Elizabeth, the Puritan age, period of the Restoration, Elizabeth century literature, the age of Romanticism, the Victor again. Is there different form in the history is very important to the literature English in the history. The other part is the English today, the English literature in the history what is now. As new literature in English emerged all over the world, literature in English is increasingly multicultural, but the crisis of this literature has not fully come to terms with this miniculturalism, especially a war with across culture is likely to be at least partly uninhabitable to some of its readers. And critics have seen this as a factor necessarily leading to the direction of the tense world. Both intelligibility and the meaningfulness are not synonymous. English literature is the study of literature written in English language. These writers do not necessarily have to be from England, but can be from all over the world. It includes some of history's most famous writers: James Joyce, Ireland; William Shakespeare, England; Mark Twain, United States; Arthur Conan Doyle, Scotland; Dylan Thomas, Wales; and Vladimir Novak, Russia, to name just a few. English literature that back more than 5 centuries in the represent his writers not only from different parts of the world and time and period, but it covers every major genre and style world was well.